In this video, we're going to learn how to use the jQuery UI to make HTML elements resizable, which means we want to be able to resize the elements using the mouse. Okay, so let's start with the Facebook div and make these elements resizable. So all we need to do is access the elements we would like to make resizable using the selector with the ID, for example. So using here the ID of Facebook. And then we need to use a method from the jQuery UI library. It's resizable. All right. Let's try. Okay, so we can see that the Facebook element now can be resized to any size we want. All right. Okay, so the resizable method has got a few options we can use. So for instance, we can specify the minimum height of the elements. Also, we can specify a maximum height and also a minimum width and a maximum width. So in order to use the options, we need curly brackets, and all the options, they will go inside the curly brackets. So for example, we can set the max height to 200. Okay, we only put the value there. We don't need pixels. We can set the min height, for instance, to 50. Again, to separate the options, we need to use a comma. Okay. We can set some min width to 100. Okay. And then let's set some max width as well to 300. Okay, let's see. So now, going from the original dimensions, once we start resizing the elements, it starts taking into account these constraints. So now, if we increase the width, we can't go beyond 300. If we decrease it, we have a min width, and the same for the height. Okay. All right. There is another option we can use. Let's say we want to have the same aspect ratio all the time. So let's say we want to go for 4:3, and we want to resize the elements by keeping the same aspect ratio. So the option we need to use is going to be aspect ratio, and let's set that to 4:3, for example. So you can see now that we are keeping the same aspect ratio. All right. There is another thing. So rather than resizing the elements as we are dragging the corner of the elements, we can have a ghost of the final elements. And then once we drop the elements, then we can see the resizing effect. Okay, so let's do that. The option to do this is going to be ghost, and we just need to set that to true. Okay, so let's see now. So now the effect of resizing will happen after we drop the mouse, but before that we can see the ghost of our elements, of our final elements. Okay. Okay, so that's how the resizable method works. Let's move to the Apple div and do something a little bit different. We're going to be accessing the Apple div as we did for Facebook, and we'll use the resizable method. Okay, first of all, let's make sure Apple is resizable. Yes, it is. And now we're going to use another way of limiting or setting limits for the dimensions of the resizing. We're going to put Apple inside a container. Basically, based on the dimensions of the container, the resizing of Apple will be limited. All right. So let's first of all, let's have a container around the Apple div. Just going to copy the contents of Apple inside another div. Okay. Let's call this one. Let's give you an ID container. All right. And let's style it. Let's say 300 pixels for the width, and let's go for a height of 300 pixels as well. Okay. And let's have a border style set to dotted, for example. Okay. So now what we'd like to do, we want to be able to resize the Apple div, but limits the dimensions of the resizing using the container. So the way to do that is to use an option. So you can guess that is going to be containment, and we need to specify which element is going to be containing our resizable elements. So in our case, the ID of the containing element is container. Okay, and let's try now and see what happens. So now we can see that we cannot resize the Apple div beyond the container limits. Okay, let's add another option before we finish. We want to add some animation to the resizing. We're going to use the animate option that we will set to true. So the way the animation works is, okay, we need the comma there. Okay. So now if we resize the Apple div, we can see that the resizing effect is animated. All right. Also, there is a way to make another div to be resized once we resize one specific div. So let's say we want to resize the Microsoft's div as soon as we resize the Facebook div. So to do that, we're going to go to the Facebook resizable method and add another option. So this one is going to be also resize. Okay, so what we're doing here, we are specifying which other elements we want to resize once we resize our Facebook div. So we're going to specify which elements we are looking at. It's going to be the Microsoft div, and we're going to be using the ID of Microsoft. Let's try and see. So now if we resize the Facebook div, we can see that the Microsoft div is getting resized as well. Okay.